Hello, Prime Minister Justin Trudeau. My name is Paul James. It is January the 25th, 2017. I want to inform you, your government and Canadian Parliament that as of today's date, I will refrain from eating and intaking fluids with the exception of water for the foreseeable future in protest to the discrimination, overt discrimination and prejudice I have received since my exposed mental health, poor mental health in the form of depression and a substance use disorder to crack cocaine in 2008 has affected my life negatively to the point that, in spite of my background, which includes an MBA, a BA, successful coaching career at York University, an international soccer career that includes 4 CONCACAF championships, 3 inductees into the Canadian Soccer Hall of Fame, and 47 appearances for the Canadian World Cup men's team, including the 1984 Olympic Games and the 1986 FIFA World Cup Championships, the one and only time that we've qualified for that tournament. It's breathtaking, as I said, the decision that I've made, but as of 2017, I'm 53 years of age. I haven't worked for 8 years, in spite of applying for over 100 jobs. I'm penniless, homeless, with no social status. It's a dramatic decision that I've made, but I watched you in 2015 and believed in your platform speeches where you said to all Canadians to trust and have faith in the Canadian judicial system. My experiences at York University is that I was discriminated against overtly, and as a result I tried to address it with York privately once I left, under tremendous distress and tremendous pressure when I needed support and help for my poor mental health. I know your mother Margaret has suffered from depression, so I know it's a very important matter to you. And as I say, if you look on the website that we've launched today, Confronting the Stigma of Drug Addiction.com, if you look at my story there and then follow over the next 10 days, you, your government and the Parliament, I think it will be enlightening to you and the many millions of Canadians on what it really truly is like to be an exposed person with poor mental health, but particularly with what we call the elephant in the room, is that you suffer from a substance use disorder, of which crack cocaine, unfortunately, even though it's not much different to the other illicit drugs, because of the very nature of what we think that it is, on a stigmatization, it has a huge negative impact on the person that gets exposed. And I'm living proof of what happens when people find out and what discrimination is. You see, discrimination and stigma are not just words. They actually are words with consequences. And if you read my story on the website and you follow it over the next 10 days, you'll see that what I've experienced, no other Canadian should experience. So I repeat, I'm a former Canadian World Cup soccer player and coach, having played for Canada 47 times, 8 times as a captain. I've got 35 international appearances as a coach. I've been in 2 Olympic Games. I've been in 2 FIFA World Cup Championships. And when I went to York University in 2003, they were a moribund program. They were $8,000 in the red, and they hadn't won a national championship in any sport in 25 years. Their women's team had never won never won a title at any level in their history of 25 years. 6 years later, we'd won a national championship on the men's side. We'd won 3 OUA championships on the women's side and 1 on the men's side, and numerous awards, including Coach of the Year awards for both Carmen Asako and myself during that period. There were a lot of reasons why we won that, but I was the leader and architect of the program's success, and then we had great staff to go along with that. Now, after 6 years of being there, I opened up to people, my supervisor, my colleagues, about the mental distress that I was under. When you look at the sky and see blue, I see grey, was what I gave to my supervisor, the information, and to my assistant coaches. They actually knew about the substance use disorder to crack cocaine. Unfortunately, in the actions that happened 12 months later after giving that information, when I would never have wanted to leave my passion in life, which was coaching, I ended up leaving York University for forced resignation because of discrimination. I repeat that, because of discrimination. When I finally filed in 2012 a discrimination claim with the Human Rights Tribunal, my life took a turn for the worst and has never ever recovered. I would like you and your government and the Canadian Parliament to look at the discrimination claims that are filed with the Canadian judicial system, and to investigate also the Canadian soccer industry to see what happens to a person that is exposed for poor mental health. I have a question for you and your government to consider, as if you look at if you look at my story on the website where it says Confronting the Stigma of Drug Addiction, and it's quite lengthy what I write, but in it I say to you as the government, is it not about time that you declare, not just the Liberal government, but the actual Canadian Parliament, because it crosses all party lines, is that substance use disorders, are they legitimate, bona fide mental health conditions? Now, I subscribe to you and to all Canadians that they are. So we need that as a declaration so that we can start treating people like myself with the dignity, with the respect and the equality and fairness that we deserve. This is for all Canadians. Because how can you explain, and how can your government and any other, and people at York University, people at McCarthy-Tétrault, the Respondent Council, people at the Tribunal, people at the Judicial Review, people at the Supreme Court, including the Chief Justice Beverly McLaughlin, how can you possibly explain that with my background, I highlighted on the website that I am, as a Canadian, homeless, 53 years of age, no pension, no RSPs, no social status, and how can you explain that I go for a job interview the other day for a dishwashing job at a local restaurant, Oyster House, downtown Toronto, and I get turned down? I am absolutely unemployable. I've lost my career, my lifetime passion. And if you look at George Michael, as I say, I was a huge fan of George Michael during the late 70s and early 80s, and it was tragic what happened. But there's some, as I say, there's some parallels there. But just as a reminder to your government, or maybe you know or you don't know, but if you reach the substance use disorder of a stimulant, cocaine, heroin, crack cocaine, you're guaranteed to take off 10 to 20 years of your life. So if you look at George Michael, Carrie Fisher is a similar situation, 60 years of age. Maybe Carrie Fisher, because she was drinking, she had depression, she had anxiety, and she also used the stimulant cocaine. We need to normalize this. I don't mean to threaten anybody by using those words, which seems to be threatening, but it actually isn't. Let's talk about it honestly. Let's be transparent, as you talked about in your platform. But what happens with Carrie Fisher, she could have lived till she was 80, take 20 years off her life because of her use. That's what happens. George Michael, 53, potentially could have lived till he was 73 or 80. But because of the chronic use of substance, that's an inevitability. So let's do the math on my own situation, through no fault of my own, in terms of trying to seek responsibly support and help from my employer. They knew I was under distress, but they forced me to leave the institution. And when I approached them on a personal level to resolve this, they stopped me at every single turn. The judicial system permits organizations that if they make mistakes, the 1-year systemic barrier permits them not to ever take responsibility. And then it becomes, unfortunately, if you look and your government look at my situation, it becomes a rigged system if it wants to be. If it wants to not deal with an issue where there's clear injustice in my situation, it can become a rigged system. So to finish off, let's look at my math. I'm homeless, I'm 53, I have no assets, no monies. As Dr. Tom McClellan from the University of Pennsylvania, Ivy League school down in the United States, said about my circumstance, he says, Paul, you can either deliver pizzas, drive a taxi cab, or be an addictions counsellor. Those are my options. 53 years of age, I'm going to be a very poor old man, but let's look at the math. 20 years is 10 to 20 years you could potentially take off your life now, or a minimum of 10 to 20 years because of the chronic use of not getting treatment early enough, because of the stigmatization of what it is to suffer from substance addiction. So let's just do the math. Let's say I was going to live till I was 80, because I'm being pretty fit and pretty active as far as my athletic background goes. But let's take off the minimum, let's say 10 years. That gives me 17 years from nothing. I haven't harmed anybody. I didn't harm anybody at York University. I did everything I possibly could to make that a successful program. There were other people involved in that and integrated, and it wasn't just a sole thing, and I appreciate the support that some of those staff members would have given. But at the end of the day, if you want to change good people to do bad things, or to turn bad people into bad people, tell them you have a substance addiction, and tell them you have a substance addiction to crack cocaine. And my experience has been, not just in the staff that I had, that were wonderful people up until that point, then what happens to me and to millions of other people behind closed doors that suffer tremendous tragedy is that you get scapegoated on everything. So I plead to you, because if you do your due diligence in your work, speak to former members of the Canadian National Programme and National Staff. They'll tell you what Paul James was like. Tell him the intensity, about his determination and his willingness to fight for causes. It's now 4 o'clock in the morning, so I've gone 4 hours without food and intake. I am not stopping. 2 months ago, on November the 10th, on a different issue. So imagine this, I actually have taken another case to the tribunal. I could have taken 20 or 30 over the past 8 years, but you move on. If somebody calls you a crackhead, you move on. If somebody doesn't legitimately give you a job, you move on. But then along the line there comes issues where I said enough is enough. York University was one of them, and I've, as a self-represented applicant, taken York University to the Supreme Court of Canada at 2 layers. I know that I'm absolutely right in this case, even down to the minutiae of case law with the system. I'm not a lawyer. I don't think anyone should be self-represented. If I was a lawyer that has spent years and money and invested in their careers, I wouldn't necessarily like a self-represented applicant to come up and to compete against. But what do you do? How does somebody like myself access social justice when you can't afford legal representation? It wasn't my choice. That's a systemic thing that the government, that the legal system has to solve. But when you are in that position, and I was in that position to defend myself, to access justice to the tremendous injustice that's been done, York University do not walk around with a good conscience when it comes to Paul James' situation. I don't think you can find another citizen in Canada at this time that has gone to the Supreme Court of Canada, spent 5 years of their life, and then are willing to put their life on the line, like I did in November, as I said, for the other case that I was doing. I got treated so poorly on another case, a much smaller case, but still, imagine this. Parents of a 14-year-old boys team and players wanted me to be the coach. They go to lobby to this local club, to the technical director, and say that. I've never met him, never talked to him. He's got all my background as far as being a Canadian international and a very successful coach at the national team level. And he said no chance, no way, he wouldn't pass a police check. I drew the line, enough is enough, and I tried for 2 years, as the court and Beverly McLaughlin encourages all people to do, and kind of pushes it on to the general public that we need to get to the courts moving quicker. Well, I tried for 2 years to resolve that matter, and it only just got resolved as a result of me doing a hunger strike for 7 days. 150 hours I didn't eat, because what I got offered in a settlement, what happens for people in my situation is that you get paid less. Why? Because in a pejorative way, you are a junkie, you are an addict, so we don't need to pay you anymore. So when I used to go out coaching, I could garner $100 an hour, let's say. But the very little bit of coaching I've done over the past 5 to 7 years, now I get paid $20 an hour. So in the negotiations, I was set a certain amount. After the hunger strike, the settlement was 4 times that. That's why I did it. Now, in this instance, where I will not stop unless I get some kind of guarantee from you as the Prime Minister of our country, from the Canadian government, that you do an investigation into the Paul James story, the Paul James situation, so that you, by association, help millions of other people to know that the Section 15 of the Canadian Charter of Rights does actually exist and does actually protect the human rights of somebody as a minority status with a mental disability. That's what I'm fighting for. That's why I'm on hunger strike. I respect you. I respect the fact that your father was a tremendous servant to our country. But my father, my mother, myself, my sister, my beautiful partner Ashley have been devastated about the last 8 years of what's gone on. It's absolutely incomprehensible. If you do your research, that's all I'm asking for. It will help millions of other Canadians and could be a game changer for many people. But we need to hold York University and the judicial system accountable for the way that they've treated me. No other Canadian should have to go through what I've gone through, and I thank you for listening to me.